welcome to the OklaRoots YouTube channel. In today's tutorial, we're going to be making the cutest little wallet. It is seriously one of my new favorite things to make. Today, we are making the small Amelia envelope wallet, and this comes to us from Miss Freckles Designs. Now, you might remember we have done another small zip wallet from Miss Freckles Designs. This is an envelope wallet, which means there is no zipper around the edges. We do have a small zip inside. I'll show you that in just a moment, but it is significantly easier. So if you are just starting out with wallets, this is a good beginner one. There are a couple little things that you are going to want to pay attention to, and I'll guide you through that in the tutorial today. But it's not a challenging make. So I just want to show this first one to you. There are a couple different options. This is one of them. So you can see we have the flap, and that's like a contrast to the body. So I have this silver vinyl on the body, and then I have this really fun little guy on the flap. And then you open it up. This one here has a plastic cam snap. You could also use a metal snap. Open it up, and look, isn't that adorable? Oh my gosh, I love this. You can have a lot of fun. This lining here for the flap is different than the lining for the body, so you can really, fussy cut. Find a good piece of fabric and fussy cut this out. But then you see when we open it up, we have two sides. Each of these have 3 card slots, but then they also have like a larger slip pocket behind them. Then the general big pockets down here in the middle, and then one small zip pocket for your coins. It is simple, it is elegant, it is useful, it is great for everybody. I mean, if you have a younger person in your life who's getting their first wallet, this is a great first wallet. If you're going to be traveling, this is a great travel wallet. You don't need all your library cards if you're going to be going on vacation somewhere. So this is a great wallet for everybody. And if you just have more simple needs, you just don't have a lot of cards and things, you don't need the big wallet. This is your wallet. It is adorable. So this is one version where we have the contrasting flap and the body, but you could just use one piece of exterior material, and you can see I am using vinyl today, and this is what it looks like. Right? Doesn't this look so good? I love this. So this is just one piece of vinyl. You don't have to use vinyl for the exterior. And you can see I did my bag tag different on this one. This one I put it over here. On the other wallet, I put it on the back. So have fun with that. But again, open it up. So useful, so cute. Does not require a lot of material at all. Does not require a lot of time. This is one of those projects, the most amount of time you're going to be spending will be prepping. Once you get everything prepped, interfaced, cut, all that stuff, sewing it together, it comes together very, very quickly. And it's just so stinking cute. So like I said, I did use vinyl on both of these. I will be using vinyl in the tutorial today. You do not have to though. And vinyl is something I kind of want to talk about. We have a lot of like sharp edges. You see down here, we have a lot of these like kind of sharp, thin edges. If you're using a vinyl that is coated, like for example, this vinyl here, it's like a woven kind of vinyl, but it has this kind of tinfoil coating on it. It can split at the seams. So you want to be careful with your vinyl. You want to use something that's just like a color all the way through so you don't have to worry about it splitting. We're going to be pulling on it a little bit. So if you're just starting out and you're not used to working with vinyl anyways, I do suggest you use like a quilt cotton or a canvas material and just make sure you add the interfacing as the pattern suggests to it. So we'll talk about interfacing a little bit more once we go through the material. So thank you so much to Miss Freckles Designs for allowing me to use your patterns in my tutorials. They are some of my absolute favorite. They are so clean, so classic. You can make them look very elegant, or you can kind of, make them a little bit more wild like I do. I love these patterns, and the patterns are written so well. It's very easy to follow along. I'm so excited to see all of you guys make this. I think as we go into the holidays, this is a great last minute gift idea, especially if you can whip up one of these. You can even use scraps for it, honestly. Make one of these, put in a gift card, give it to somebody in your life. It's just perfect. It'd be a great teacher gift as well. I don't know. I love the teachers in our life. I would gift them almost anything that I make, but this is a good quick gift. I like that. So if you're new to the OklaRoots YouTube channel, please consider clicking subscribe down below. If at any point you like this video, please give it a like. Any questions, comments, shout outs, anything at all you want to say, leave it down in the comment section down below. I will have timestamps as always for every single step of this tutorial. They will be running along the bottom of your screen. You can also find them down in the description. So just click the little arrow down on the bottom of the screen and it will expand that description. And that's where you're gonna find links to all of the items that I'm using, as well as links to all the timestamps. All right, guys, let's get started. So in today's tutorial, I will be doing version B, option B for this wallet. And that just means it's gonna have a contrasting exterior flap than it does the body. So for the exterior, I am going to use vinyl once again. Like I said, if you're just starting out, don't use vinyl. Go ahead and use some canvas, some quill cotton, something like that, and then we'll just add interfacing to it to make it easier to work with. Vinyl is fantastic for wallets because it's more durable, right? You can wipe it down, you can get it dirty, you don't have to worry about it staining so much, but it can be a little bit more challenging to sew, especially with some of these more tight corners and folds that we have today. For the exterior part, which is just the body of the exterior of the wallet, you're gonna need about a fat quarter, a fat eighth, not much at all. And then same thing for the contrasting flap, you just need a small cut. A fat quarter or a fat eighth will do. For the interior of the fabric, the lining, I am gonna be using 2 different fabrics today. And the reason I do that is because I like a little bit of variation. So I pretty much have like my body lining, and I also use the body lining as the exterior pieces for these little flaps over here. So I don't want to use vinyl here. I want to use quill cotton because it's going to be easier. So I have one lining that I use for the body, for the exterior part of the flap, and then I use another piece of quill cotton for the pockets, and then you can see on the inside of these little flaps over here. You see what I mean? You can have a lot of fun with this. You can make it super, super scrappy, and it's still going to come together and look like it was designed to be that way. Okay, so let's talk interfacings. I'm actually not using any sort of like SF101, Pellon Shape Flex, nothing like that today, which is a little crazy, but we do want to keep the seams as thin as possible, but we also want to keep the fabric as firm as possible. So we have a bit of a situation here, right? We want to get the fabric really beefy and tough and firm, but also keep everything really light and thin in the seams. So this is what we're going to use. Today I'm using SewFuse Plus. This comes from Castine Handcrafted. It is a supplement for Pellon 808 Craft Fuse, which has a more paper-like feel to it, but this is better. Craft Fuse wrinkles a lot. This does not wrinkle. I have been working with this on both of the wallets and I love it. It has like a more durable paper feel to it, so it makes sure that everything is very crisp and tough, but we keep it out of the seams, and so we don't have to worry about bulky seams. And then to go with my exterior vinyl, I'm using Decoville Light. Now, you can use Decoville Heavy if you'd like a much more firm exterior. But since I am using vinyl, the combination of the vinyl and the Decoville Light is perfect. If I was using quilt cotton or something more lightweight for the exterior of this wallet, I would use Decoville Heavy. And just to be safe, I would get a ½ yard of each of these. All right, so here's all the other stuff I'll be using today. So for a zipper, I have zipper tape here. You just need like 5 inches. That's it. You don't need a whole 3 yards of zipper tape. It's just what I have. But if you have scraps of zipper tape, I know a lot of us love to use zipper tape and then we end up with these little scraps. This is the project for those little bits that you have left over. So just about 5 inches long and then a zipper pull to go with it. This is just for that zip pocket on the inside of the wallet. The thread I'm using today, once again, of course, is this Wizardry Stitchery variegated thread. It is Tex 35 weight, which is great for most domestic machines. And the needles I'm using are Schmetz 9014. You could also use 8012 here. You don't really need the toughest, thickest needle. I actually think an 8012 might work better. I might switch it out. I think an 8012 might work better for this project. Next, I have all my marking tools. A tool for marking on vinyl, a blue chalk pencil, an air erasing marker, and then a white chalk pen. You just never know where you're going to need a mark. You want to have a lot of options. And then, of course, I have my handy dandy 1 inch by 6 inch ruler. Next, I have some double-sided tape. This is just the Dritz Wash Away 1/4 inch double-sided tape. And then I have my rivet press here because I'm going to be using my rivet press for the snap. Now you don't need to get a rivet press just to put in one of these snaps. You can get a kit with a hand press to set these and you're going to be fine. For example, this is my go-to press when I do plastic snaps. You can see I have the plastic snap die already installed. I never take it out. This is just my plastic snap press no matter what I'm making. So you can get one of these to even set these. This will work with those dies. But today I am using these little metal fashion snaps. I'll have links for all of this down below. And to go with that, you're going to need the set of dies. You need one pair of dies to set one side of the snaps and another pair of dies to set the other side of the snaps. A lighter is very useful because we're going to have some loose threads that we want to clean up, but they're going to still be shown in the end. And then my handy dandy stiletto from By Annie. Can't live without it. So much so, I actually have a second one over here. Also, a nice healthy supply of clips, and then, of course, a seam ripper stiletto because I make mistakes. All right, so let's discuss the pattern pieces. First, I have my exterior body panel. Now remember, I'm using option B here. So there's different pattern pieces if you're using option A. But this is just going to be the body of my wallet, this fun, like, salmon-looking snakeskin print with metallics in it. I love it. And then I have a smaller cut, remember this is a different pattern size, it is smaller than this one, of my Decoville Light. I will also be using my bag tag on the exterior here, so I just wanted to show that to you. And then here's my flap. Isn't this cute? So what I like to do is just kind of like faux put it together like this to kind of get an idea of what it's going to look like. It's going to be a lot smaller than this. But this is my flap. Just make sure you remember orientation here. The flap is going to be upside down most of the time when you see it, so if you have a directional print, just think about that. And then I have another piece of Decoville Light for the flap. Once again, this is a different pattern piece than the piece you use to cut the material out with. So regardless of which version you're doing, option A or option B, the lining is the same. So you're gonna have one cut for your flap, and then I have a cut of my SoFuse Plus here. Again, you could also use Pellon 808, some like craft fuse, something like that for this. And then I have the interior body panel, and then another cut of my Craft Fuse Plus for that as well. All right, so let's talk about these dividers. You're gonna have 2 cuts of exterior and 2 cuts of lining for each one of these. The difference in them, they are slightly different in shape, and then the placement of the interfacing is different for them. So pay attention to which one you're doing. When you're cutting out the material, make sure you put this on the right side of your fabric with the pattern piece right side up and cut it like that, okay? So, like I said, I'm not actually using my exterior fabric because my exterior fabric is vinyl and I don't want to use vinyl here. So I'm just using one version of my lining material as the exterior and another version as the interior. I've already got some of them fused on. So you see when I flip this over, here is the interfacing, and then I flip it down, it's more towards the left. So just pay attention to that. I am going to fuse a few more on for you today just to show you how to place it easily. So you have divider 1 and divider 2. You're going to do the same thing. When you're cutting out your interfacing, if you realize, oh, I cut them out backwards because I didn't position the template, then just switch them. Just switch them. You'll be fine. Next up are your cuts for your zipper pocket. You're going to have 4 cuts from your lining fabric, whichever lining fabric you want. 2 of them will have the interfacing, 2 of them will not have any interfacing. So remember, your interfacing cut is smaller than the actual pattern piece. And then finally, we have our card slots. This is how big the strip is when you cut it out. This is what it turns out to be when you're done. You see, it becomes very small. So you're gonna have one big strip, but then you're gonna have quite a few of these smaller cuts of interfacing. So we're not just gonna interface the whole thing. We're gonna strategically place where these interfacings go to reduce bulk. Again, that's the big goal here. We want everything as thin but as tough and durable as possible. So before we get started sewing, we need to prepare all of our materials. So I'm gonna start with the exterior panels. I'm gonna fuse on my Decoville Light to my vinyl. And I get questions about this quite often. So first of all, if you look at your pattern piece, it's gonna tell you what the seam allowance is. And we want the Decoville Light to be inside that seam allowance. It's 3/8 of an inch all the way around. So this is where I grabbed my small ruler and a marking tool. And what I did is I just marked 3/8 of an inch along this bottom edge here, and then also a little bit on the sides. And that just gives me a general idea of where to put this. Because now I can just scooch in my interfacing right in that pocket. And now I should have 3/8 of an inch all the way around. Now with vinyl, we have to be careful with the heat because we can melt it, especially if we're fusing it from the front, which we are not. We're fusing it from the back, but we also don't want our iron to touch the back of the Decoville Light. They don't get along. So I'm going to cover my entire unit with just a scrap piece of cotton material. And then I've got my iron nice and hot, nice and steamy, and I'm just gonna fuse this on with a lot of heat and a lot of steam. If you have a heat press, then this would also work with that as well. That's usually the quickest way to fuse all this. You can lay them all out on your heat press and then just push it down, press them all, and you're done. Super fast. So let's see, once we have that fused on, just check your corners, make sure nothing's coming up. All right, that looks good. So let's put this to the side. Now we're gonna do the same thing with our flap and the Decoville Light for the flap. Again, if you're using a thinner material, Decovil Heavy might be what you chose for this. I'm going to flip the flap over, and I'm going to check my design, and yeah, it's 3/8 of an inch all the way around again. So once again, I'm going to take my ruler, mark a line that is 3/8 of an inch along the bottom, and then little marks on the sides as well, so I have a little pocket to just slide this in. You could also eyeball it, that's fine if you're comfortable. Just kind of eyeballing it, that's great. Okay, so I have my little pocket, my little bench right here, and I'm just gonna take my Decovil light and lay it over it. There we go. And then I'll take my scrap material, lay it over that, and then let's just fuse it together. All right, now we have that fused to the material. So it's gonna be pretty bendy when it's hot, so you don't wanna like put this on something where it's curved or anything like that. You wanna keep it in a nice flat place. So now we can just repeat that with the interfacing and the lining panels. So once again, these are all 3/8 of an inch. So just like I did with the exterior, I'm gonna mark my little marks here and then take my interfacing and just line it up with those marks and fuse them on the exact same way I did with the vinyl. And since this is quilt cotton, I can flip it over and I can fuse it again from the front, which is always best. Interfacing usually fuses best to the material if you fuse it from the right side of the material. It has like the best access to the glue. So I'm just gonna go one time over the front as well. I've already fused it onto the back with covering the back of the interfacing with my scrap, but I'm just gonna go once over the front as well. Next, let's work on the zipper pocket. Now remember, the zipper pocket has 4 pieces of material, but only 2 of them are gonna be fused with interfacing. So if you have a preference on which ones those are, the ones that have the interfacing on them will be on like the outside of the pocket, and the ones without the interfacing will be on the inside of the pocket. You'll only see that when you open up the zipper. So if you have a preference on which materials are seen, then make sure you use that for the pieces that you put the interfacing on. So for these, you're just going to make sure that there is a 1/4 inch on the bottom and also on the top, and then fuse this on. I always fuse it from the back first, and I always cover it when I do that, and then I'll flip it over and fuse it from the front as well. Next up are our little dividers. Now, the dividers are pretty simple to fuse. You just gotta make sure you put them on the right side, that's all. So when you're holding this, just make sure you look and see. I think these got swift. So I'm already getting confused. So make sure you have everything separated the way you want. So for example, I'm on divider 1 here, and divider 1 is going to have a 3/4 inch seam allowance on the right side. So I don't want my interfacing anywhere in that. So what I do is when I'm looking at it like this, here's my material, and I have to take my material and flip it over. And when I measure that 3/4 of an inch, I'm measuring from the left side, right? Because it's flipped over. So if I measure from the left side over here, 3/4 of an inch, mark my line. And then I also like to mark a little 3/8 of an inch on the bottom and the top as well, just so I know where my pocket is. And then when I take my interfacing and I put my interfacing on, I know right now it looks like the complete opposite of what it's supposed to be, but when I flip it over, it'll be correct. You see what I'm saying? I know these ones took me a minute to kind of visualize, but once you get it, it's pretty simple. So I'm gonna fuse divider 1 for both of these. So I made my little pocket on both of them. I have my interfacing lined up. I'm just gonna cover this with my scrap material, and then I'll press it from the back with, again, a lot of heat and a lot of steam, and then I'll flip it over and I'll press it from the front as well. And I know it seems like everything has to be super, super perfect, and if it's not in the exact right spot, the whole thing is ruined. And I just want to remind you, it's not the case at all. If it's not in the exact right spot to the millimeter, it's still going to turn out great. All right, so here are my divider 1s. They are good to go. Make sure I put those there. And now I'm going to do the same thing with my divider 2s. I have 2 pieces of material left, and I like to keep this out so I can see it. I'm going to flip them over, and this time I want the 3/4 of an inch seam allowance to be on the left side, so when I mark it, I have to mark it on the right side, because again, it's flipped over. You guys know what I'm saying. All right, so now I'll take the divider 2 interfacing and put that on the back in my pocket, and then I will just fuse these on like I have the other dividers. All right, so once you have all of your dividers interfaced, you can go ahead and put them to the side. Now, last up, we have the card compartment panel. And this is a little bit more specific. You know, if there was any piece you wanted to be more precise about, it's going to be this one. First of all, this is quilt cotton. If I yank on this, it's going to stretch. It's not super wide, but it's very tall, so it can be stretchy. So we don't want it to stretch. We want to just keep it together, okay, until we sew it together. So what I do is I actually take the pattern piece, and this big top piece here, we don't have any interfacing there, so I can kind of let that overhang. And I'm going to line it up with the top and the bottom, just like this. And then I just scooch it over by about 1/4 of an inch. I just scooch it over a little bit. I make sure, again, the top and the bottom are completely lined up, 1/4 of an inch over. And now I'm gonna mark placement for my interfacing. So right here I have interfacing 1, and then I'm gonna have another interfacing 1 right here. And remember, when you cut this out, you have interfacing 1 and interfacing 2. They're not the same size. And then I have another interfacing 1 down here. And then I have an interfacing 2 down here, close to the bottom, but it doesn't go all the way to the bottom. There is a seam allowance there. So now I'm just gonna put the paper over towards the left. So now my little 1/4 inch seam allowance gap is over here on my right. Make sure it's lined up at the top and the bottom. Good. All right, and I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna mark placement for my interfacing 1s, 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 and then also for number 2 down here. Now, if that's good enough for you, then you can continue on. But I want to show you that these interfacing pieces don't go all the way to the side. So it can be a little hard to figure out exactly where this goes because there is a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance on both sides. That's where you're going to take your ruler and you're just going to mark a line connecting those tick marks that you already made. So you can see I just find all the tick mark buddies and I connect a line between them. All right, there we go. Now we have placement for everything. And now I do eyeball this. Now you can take your ruler and go down the side if you'd like and mark in 3/8 of an inch so you have the perfect rectangle pocket for where these go. I am more lazy than that. So here is one of my interfacing 1s, and I'm just going to line it up between the 2 top lines. And then I'm just going to center it to make sure it's about the same on both sides. Here we go. And then I take my, scrap piece of material, cover it, and fuse it. And I'm just going to do this 1 by 1 with each piece. So when I'm fusing it from the back, I'm fusing it just enough to stick. It's not perfectly fused on, it's just enough to stick because I'm going to fuse it again from the front. So there's number 1. Let's put it down. Okay, we need another number 1 here for the next compartment. And if you get confused, just make sure you have your template out next to you so you can refer to it. You don't want to stick this right here. It's not going to fit there anyways, and that's not where it goes. There we go. That's centered. All right, so then I have my next number 1 piece. It goes right here in the 3rd slot. And then for the last one, I have the interfacing 2, which is a slightly shorter piece than the interfacing 1. And I'm going to put that right here on the bottom. Here we go. So once I have them all stuck on there, now what I'm going to do is flip the whole thing over, and I'm going to press them really well with a lot of steam from the front just to make sure they're perfectly in there. Now, we're going to be folding this and tucking them in. They're not going anywhere, trust me. But we want to fuse them as much as we can because it's just going to prevent some headaches later. All right, so you should have 2 of these for your card slot pockets. Go ahead and put them to the side. So if you're doing option B like I am, let's go ahead and prep our main panel. So you're going to need your flap and the body, and we're just going to lay them right sides together so that we're connecting the flat edge of the flap to the top edge of the body. So just like that. Go ahead and grab some clips and clip these together so they don't move around on you. And now we're going to sew these together at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, so that should just be right along the line of the Decoville Light. If you're using a Decoville Light or Decoville Heavy here, you don't want to sew on top of the interfacing, you just want to kiss it. You just want to be right next to it. All right, once you have these sewn together, what you want to do is you want to press this so that the seam goes behind the body, okay? So we're pressing it down behind the body. Yeah, it's a little bulky if you're using vinyl, but that's where it goes, down behind the body. Now we're going to flip this over, and now we're going to top stitch along the body side at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So that should just be holding down that seam, right? Isn't this so cute? I'm already so excited. This is when I immediately start flipping it around, and it's like, oh my gosh, that's so happy. So if you have a bag tag, you can add it on now. You can add it to the back. This is a good time to do it because now you know exactly where that seam is. You can add it to the back like that. I know with a single piece, it's a little bit harder to figure out where that would go. So what you could also do is just add it to the top of the bottom. So to visualize that, it's kind of hard. If I do it this way, it'll be upside down. So I flip it over and I fold it up like it's going to be in the end. And then I just kind of place my tag like that. So this is totally up to you. Don't put the tag too far down. You will have a snap here. You don't want to snap through your tag. I would have it about 1/4 of an inch down from where the edge of the deckable light is. So maybe about 5/8 of an inch down from the top raw edge if you wanted it on the bottom under the flap like this. I actually really like it on the back, so I'm going to center this on the back and I'm just going to have it go down. What is this? About 3/8 of an inch from the seam right here. And I like to use double-sided tape for this just because when I get to the machine, I never get this straight. So I'm going to use double-sided tape to help me with this. All right, so now that I have that taped on, I'm just going to take this to the machine and I'm going to top stitch around all 4 edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So, like I've been doing with all my bag tags, I leave the tails really long. I don't use the automatic thread cutter in my machine or anything like that to cut them short. I keep them nice and long. Then I flip this over so I have my 2 bobbin tails, and so I'll just pull on those bobbin tails and that creates a little loop with the top stitching thread, and I can pull that top thread to the back just like that. So now I have all 4 threads back here and I just double them up and then I triple knot it. You don't need to do this. You can backstitch on the front if you'd like. It just looks a little cleaner. And then you can just trim down those tails and you're good. All right, so now we have our exterior panel built. You can put this to the side. So now grab your interior body panel and also the pattern piece that goes with it. And we need to mark these lines right here. So one way I do it is I just fold along one of the lines and then I make sure it's lined up on the side as well. And so then I just go from the bottom here, just like this. And I'm going to use an air erasing marker for this, but it will probably erase before I get to this step, so I'm going to do a little bit on the side as well. So there's one line, see, that's for this top line. All you have to do is just flip this over and then put it on the top edge, like that. And I like to kind of lift it up on the side and make sure that this top line right here that's on my pattern piece lines up with the line I just marked. It does, great. And then I'll just mark that other line like that. And that should give me my little gap here. Now, like I said, this is probably going to fade over time, so I'm also going to just mark with some chalk right along the edge. Now you have to be careful here because if this is quilt cotton, this is going to start fraying pretty quickly. So the more we work with this, the more the fraying is going to happen and stretching can happen, so we want to be careful. Then grab your interior flap, and on the back of it, we're going to also mark some knot lines. These are bending areas, and we'll go over that in just a little bit. This is probably the trickiest part for most people, but it's not that bad. So the bottom edge of the bending area is going to go right along the mark we already made when we were setting our interfacing. So I can just kind of line this up with the bottom straight edge of my flap and just mark just like that. There we go. And again, this is guidance for later. If you're using an air erasing marker, it might fade by the time we get to this step. That's okay. You can always redo it at a later step, but let's just mark it for now. There we go. So now take your lining body panel and your lining flap, and we're going to lay them right sides together. If you have a directional print and you want it to be a certain way, go ahead and think about that. I'm okay with it all like this. So I'm just going to fold this down right sides together, just like we did with the exterior if you're doing option B. Clip these together. And now let's sew along this top clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. So you might have noticed that I used a little scrap piece of fabric before I sewed on this right here. That's considered a leader fabric. What happens is I'm using a thick needle and I have very thin fabric, so what the needle wants to do is just kind of push the fabric down into the machine and it jams up and needles break and it's terrible. By using that little scrap piece of fabric first, it prevents that from happening. Now, just like we did on the exterior, we're going to fold the seam down behind the body, just like that. And you can press this with an iron if you'd like to. Honestly, even with quilt cotton, you probably don't need to. And then we're going to top stitch right along this edge right here on the body panel at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, making sure that we're top stitching over the seam as well. Alrighty, there you go. Now your lining is all prepped. Let's work on those card slots. So here is what we're starting with. Here is what we're going to end up with. This is not that challenging, and it's something that I know when I started out I felt was very, very challenging before I tried it. So if you haven't tried one of these, just try it. It's really not that bad. So we're going to flip our card slots over like this so that the piece that's the number 2 interfacing piece that's all the way right along the edge is to the left, and then that empty one is over here towards the right. And we're just going to accordion this. So right here under this, on the right side of this first interfacing piece, I'm just going to fold this wrong sides together. I'm not figuring out exactly where it goes. I don't have any measurement marks. I'm just hugging it around the edge of the interfacing. And the one thing I am paying attention to though are these sides here. I don't want it like this. That's not a good card slot. We want them straight, right? We want everything to stay straight. So just straighten it out. Hug it right around the edge of that interfacing, and then grab your iron and iron it in place. Okay, so now we're going to flip it over. We're going to do it the other way. So now we're going to fold this up and see we're on this other piece of our interfacing, this closer edge of our other interfacing, and we're going to, instead of hugging it around the back of that interfacing, we're going to fold the pieces right sides together. And this is why it's important that that interfacing is applied really well, because if you start rolling this and the interfacing just comes right off, that's a problem. There we go. All right, so that looks good. So now from the front, I can just give it a good press. Here's where we're at. All right, so we just pressed right sides together. Now we're going to press wrong sides together again. So we have this bottom edge, or this right edge, of the next interfacing piece, and we're just going to wrap the material right around it. Nice and tight, but don't stretch anything too wonky. Make sure the sides are all lined up, and then just press right along that edge. There we go. So now we can just flip this over, and we want to press along the next interfacing block. We're pressing the material right sides together. There we go. Now I like to flip it over and press it, but you could also press it from the back. But I like to flip it over, tighten it up, give it a press. Also just because I like to look at it a lot while I'm working on this. I think card slots are cute, so I like to look at them a lot. All right, flip it back over. And then hug around the other side of that interfacing, wrong sides together. Here we go. See, now mine's starting to veer off a little bit, starting to try to twist on me, so I'm going to twist it back. And if that means that it's not perfectly hugging every single bit of this interfacing, that's okay. I'm okay with that. I am more concerned about it being straight than it completely wrapping around the very, very edge of the interfacing. So I'm going to flip it back over again. And I'm going to flip them so the fabric is right sides together. There we go. And just to see it, flip it right side up. All right, once again, let's flip it over. And now we're on the very end here, and we're just gonna wrap this around the bottom of that interfacing. And the goal is to get it all the way up to the other edge of the fabric. So if it doesn't quite reach, that's okay. We can finagle this, but you can, you can stretch it. You can get it there. There we go. I mean, we're gonna adjust that a little bit more, but right now you do want to get those two raw edges, the short raw edges of your card slots to come together. So if you kind of have to mush it around a little bit, then mush it around a little bit. I mean, it's gonna hold your card no matter what, so it doesn't have to be totally perfect. And depending on what material you're using, if some of these are not exactly straight, you're not gonna notice. All right, there we go. And now our card slot pocket is all pressed, and we just have to sew it up. It's ready to go. All right, so once you have this pressed really well, my suggestion is wait until it's cool to work with it, because this interfacing is just like craft fuse. When it's hot, it's very gooey and malleable, and we don't want it to change right now. We want it to stay like this. So as it cools down, it becomes like a firmer piece of paper. So once this is nice and cool, let's take it to the sewing machine, and we have 4 folded edges. See, 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to top stitch along each one of these edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, making sure you move everything out of the way. So you'll see I'll start right here along this edge, And then I flip it out of the way. I'm not gonna sew through all the card slot pockets. It's not gonna do me any good if I sew through everything. And then I'm gonna top stitch along this edge, take it, move it out of the way, top stitch along the next, flip it out of the way, and then do the last one. All right, once you have it all top stitched, you can open it up. And what we wanna do is take these two short edges here and pull them right sides together. So just line them up right sides together. Use some clips to hold it. And you can see how much fraying I have right now? The more you work with this, the more fraying you're gonna have. And so we wanna work with it as little as possible. All right, so now we're gonna sew along this clipped edge, these two raw edges here at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Now once you have this sewn, I like to just take one edge of the flap. The pattern says to press the seam open, but you can actually do it by just taking one of the little flaps of the seam, folding it down, and then pressing it like that. You're still pressing it open, but you don't have to press both sides. All right, so now you're gonna take your whole unit and flip it right side out. And this part gets it can be a little finagly because you gotta pull everything and it might not wanna go exactly where you wanna put it. So what I do is I just start forcing it where I need it. There we go. And you'll see that once you do that, once you start really pulling on the pockets and getting them where you want it, that seam that we just made, that we just sewed, it just runs along the bottom really nicely. And then once you have it the way you want it, you grab that iron and you press it. All right, and then I also like to grab some clips and clip right along the edge, just because I don't want it moving around anymore. I want it to stay like this. So now I'm just gonna sew right along both of these edges at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, just to hold it in place like this before I sew it down to the body lining. All right, so you're gonna repeat that with the other card slot pocket. I find it easier just to do both at the same time. So now grab your body lining, and what we still need to do, which I forgot to do before, is we need to mark the midpoints on these two lines we marked going right along the center of our body lining. So easiest way to do that is just to fold it. And then I'm actually looking at the markings that I made on the edges here and lining those up. And then I just pinch it and mark the midpoint, just like that. And then we're going to find the midpoint on the bottom edge of our card slot pockets, which again, you can just fold it or you can get a ruler and measure whichever way is easiest for you. Just mark the midpoint. All right, now what we're gonna do is we're gonna take one of our card slot pockets and we're gonna line it up right along one of the lines. So for now, it's gonna be the top line, and we're gonna match up those midpoint marks. There we go. And then if you have clips that can reach it, you can add clips here to hold it in place. And now we're gonna take this to the sewing machine and we're gonna top stitch along the sides, this bottom folded edge, and then the other side. Make sure you back stitch at the tops here, and that's just gonna attach this to the body lining. There we go, there's one pocket. So now we're just gonna flip the whole unit over so that we have the bottom rectangular edge up, and we're gonna attach the other pocket the exact same way, just lining it up on that marked line and then matching up the midpoints. There we go. And then we'll take our clips or pins or tape, whatever you need to use here. Just hold it together. All right, once again, we're going to sew along the edges and the bottom at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Here we go, it's coming together. You can see how it's gonna be. Isn't that cute? Okay, go ahead and put this to the side. Now, grab all of your dividers. We're going to build these. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna buddy them all up. Every divider 2 needs a buddy divider 1, but it needs to be lining and exterior. So for example, this is what I'm considering like my exterior fabric. This is what I'm considering as my lining fabric. I need a lining from number 2 and an exterior from number 1, and then we take them and then they hug each other, right? Just like this. And when you do that, you should be able to kind of pull on the side of the interfacing so that when they're right sides together, they're on the same side, you see? So once again, let's see, this is an exterior, this is a lining, 2 and 1, buddy up. There we go, get a partner. Oh, no, we don't want those two together. We want these two together. There we go, buddy up and buddy up. Perfect. So now take each of your units. You should have 4 buddy units here. I know I keep saying buddies. I don't know why. There we go. So make sure that they line up along all of their edges. Use pins or clips if you need to so that they don't move around on you. And now we're going to take these to the sewing machine and we're going to sew along the top, the side, and the bottom, leaving open the side with the 3/4 of an inch seam. So make sure you have the gap, the big gap, that's gonna stay open on each one of these. You're going to sew along the top at 3/8 of an inch. You're going to sew along the shorter seam side, the 3/8 of an inch side at 3/8 of an inch, and also the bottom. And make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end each time because we are going to be turning these right side out. Once you have them all sewn, what we want to do is cut down the corners, but not the corners by the opening. So remember, we have an opening here at the 3/4 of an inch seam. We don't want to cut those corners. We're only going to cut the corners that we sewed the corners at. You know what I mean? So we're just going to cut them down at a 45-degree angle, just like this. This is just going to allow those corners to poke out really nicely when we turn this right side out. Now let's take them and flip them right side out carefully, okay? This material can be very thin. I meant to show this tool in the beginning, but this is my favorite turning tool. So when I flip this out, I still have these little corners here that look kind of like a mess. And when I take my turning tool, I just very gently push in there, very gently, very, very gently. We're going to get to a point where we could start ripping things. So very gently, I poke in to those corners, and now I have those nice corners. So I'm going to do this for all 4 of my units. All right, once you have them turned out nicely, just make sure all the seams are pushed out because we want these to be all the same shape and size. So push them all out and then give it a good press. And that will just make sure that they all stay where we want them to stay. So there we go. So go ahead and do this for all 4 of your dividers. Once you have these pressed, now what we're going to do is we're going to top stitch along the top and the bottom, the curved edges on each one of these. You don't need to top stitch along this edge over here. We're going to be sewing that later. Just top stitch along the top and the bottom of each one of your dividers at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So I wanted to offer one little tip. When you're top stitching on the tops and bottoms of these, I like to back stitch along the folded edge here. So this kind of cleaner edge, I like to back stitch right there because I really don't want this top stitching to come undone over time. But by doing that, what happens is, I don't know if you can even see on these, but we have like these little tiny itty bitty tails, and you can cut really close, but then it can take some time to kind of finagle those tails. I burn them. So very carefully, I will take a lighter and I'm just gonna burn down those tails, and only on this folded edge here where I top stitched. I don't care about the raw edge over here. All of that's going to be eaten up in a seam. It doesn't matter. But this folded kind of neater edge, which is going to be seen in the end, I really don't want any little pieces of thread hanging off of it, you know, kind of tickling your fingers, whatever you use the wallet. You know what I mean. It's a very small thing, but can be a really big nuisance when you worked so hard on something that turned out pretty perfect. You know what I mean? So I'm just melting it down. I'm not trying to catch anything on fire. I'm just melting it. There we go. And that just ensures a really clean edge here, so you don't have to worry later about, you know, trimming down little bits. That's just something small. All right, it's coming together. So now grab your lining that has the card slots on it, and then grab one of your dividers. Now, think about it this way. How do you want this to look? I'm gonna have it so that the exterior, which is this print right here, is going to be facing right side up. So whenever this is open, this is the side you'll see, you know, this is the fabric you'll see on the side, and this is the fabric you'll see on the inside. If you have a preference, think about that. So we're going to take our pieces, make sure you grab the right ones. You know, you don't want to grab like this one if that's not the look you're going for. So just lay it out first the way you want it. There we go. The larger edge is the top, the shorter edge is the bottom. And we're going to line up the bottom edge right here, just this corner, this bottom corner of the raw edge with our line that we marked right along this edge right here with the bottom of that card slot pocket. And obviously this is not going to line up perfectly with it. It is a curve. It's going to go down. But we do want to line up the raw edges perfectly straight. So get those lined up and then clip together. All right, so I have that top left one done. Now I'm going to do the same thing on the top right. I'm going to find this bottom corner right here and line it up with that little line that I already made for placement of my card slot pocket. And just using those lines, make sure that everything ends up where it's supposed to be. It all looks neat. There we go. Now I actually like to attach them all at once, so I'm gonna rotate this whole thing around. And I'm gonna do the same thing with this other card slot pocket unit. I'm going to lay my dividers the way I want them in the end. There we go. This looks so cute, doesn't it? And on this bottom left corner, I'm gonna line that up with that mark that I made that's at the bottom of the other card slot pocket. And just line it up with the raw edge. That's my only straight edge, you know, that's raw. So those are the ones I'm gonna line up. And do the same thing on the other side. All right, now we can go to the sewing machine and we're just gonna sew right along these flaps at a 5/8 inch seam allowance. Yes, 5/8 inch, bigger than a 1/2 inch. 5/8 inch seam allowance. That's also gonna close up the raw edges on your card slot pockets. It's all coming together, guys. It looks so good. So 5/8 of an inch on both sides, sewing these dividers down. Alrighty, it's all attached. You see when you open it up, the raw edges of the card slot pockets are now hidden. It's looking good. All right, so now the big part here. We're gonna sew the exterior and the lining together, but we're not gonna just do it all at once. We're gonna do it in sections. So take your exterior piece and lay it right side up. Take your lining piece and let's lay that right side down. And you should notice they are not the same size. There's a little bit of overhang on the bottom. There's a little bit of overhang on the top. That's okay, that's how we want it. What's so cool about this pattern is that it takes into account this natural fold. We want to encourage the fold right here, and we want to encourage the fold right here. If everything is perfectly flat and the same size, when we fold this, we have a lot of bunching. You know, you kind of have that like ugly rippling effect in the lining. By thinking about this and sewing it at a curve, it just helps it naturally shape itself like this. And it's not challenging. We're gonna go through it together. You're gonna be fine. All right, so the first thing we wanna do is line up the seam along this top flap lining and the top flap exterior. If you're using one piece of material here, grab your pattern piece. There will be a line for placement of where this needs to be. So you're going to be using your lining and either the seam on your exterior or the marked line on your exterior to line these up together. And it's not the top of the flap or the top of your pockets, it's the top where the seam is. All right, so I have it clipped at the seam. Do you see I have a little bit of overhang right here and a little bit of overhang down here? It's not much, but it's gonna be good for later. So what I'm gonna actually do is I need some of these marked lines that I marked on the front, on the back. So I'm just gonna kind of fold over my lining and I see where I marked that line for the bottom of my card slot pocket and I'm just gonna transfer it to the back. There we go. I just need to be able to see where that is on the back side. You might even be able to see it through your fabric depending on how light it is. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna sew from the seam here, so you should be able to see the stitching on the back here. You're gonna sew from that seam where we connected everything all the way down to this marked line at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end and do this on both sides. We're not sewing everything, we're just sewing this right here. So perfect, we have this part here sewn. So now let's flip this around so that we have the bottom edge. Now, these are not at the same place, right? But we're gonna make them at the same place. We're gonna fold up that exterior. We're gonna fold it up, kind of scoop it up to bring it so that it matches up with this raw edge of our lining, and we're going to clip it. Now, if I let this go and flatten it out, it's not going to line up with the lining. It has to be curved like that. So you see we're forcing a curve here. So we're gonna just clip along that edge. And if you haven't already done this, you wanna transfer those marks that we made on the front here to the back, just like we did on the other side. So I can actually see them through my fabric. And it's just those straight lines that we marked for placement of our card slot pockets. We're gonna use those to help us here too. There we go. Okay, so I've got these clipped and I want them to stay like that. And now I'm going to clip along the side all the way down to that mark. And I'm not flattening it out. I'm keeping it bowled up like this. So it's just kind of L shape-ish. I mean, it's not a total L shape. It's not a huge bend, but it's enough to be noticeable. There we go. So I have the sides of the bottom here, the bottom edge, and the other side clipped in place. Again, this is a bowl shape. I have to kind of hold it tenderly. And then on this bottom short edge here, I marked in 1.5 inches on each side because this is a hole we're gonna leave right in the middle to turn the whole thing out. So we're gonna start at this mark over here, and we're going to stitch at a 3/8 inch seam allowance to the corner, and then we're gonna pivot, and then once we get to this mark, we're going to back stitch, and then we're gonna skip over the opening, start here, back stitch, go around the corner until we get to the other mark over here, and then back stitch there as well. Here's the thing about back stitching. This is a really tight area, and so depending on the type of vinyl you're using, it could break or rip here. The more you backstitch and go over things, the more likely it is your vinyl is going to tear. So when you backstitch, just backstitch like one stitch. That's it. Don't go nuts going over and over again. You're just gonna rip your vinyl. So let's go to the sewing machine and sew this together. While I'm at the machine, I am keeping this curved up. So I'm gonna kind of hold it from the back like this and help it stay up. I'm not gonna flatten it out at any point. I need this to stay like it is. So now you see, I don't even have to hold it, and it just naturally, it's gonna curve. And that's so cool, because that's how we want the wallet to be, right? We want it to be kind of curved. So now all we have to do is sew along this little opening right here. You know, you can put your fingers in there because we haven't sewn between those lines yet. And when you sew this, again, just encourage the curve. Don't try to shove anything down. I mean, you can rip something or stretch something. You don't want to do that. So you want to encourage the curve and just start right where your stitching ended. Go right over to the next stitching. Make sure you backstitch just like one stitch on each one. You don't have to backstitch a lot, just a little bit. So do this for both sides at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Alrighty, you're just about done. So now you see on this top edge right here, it doesn't reach. So you know what we're gonna do. We're gonna curve that exterior up so that it reaches this little triangle point up here. So you're gonna curve it up and clip right at the tip there, and then clip right along this triangle edge. We're gonna go all the way down to that marked line. Remember, we marked this line on our flap. If you need your pattern piece, go ahead and grab it. Remember, this is the bending area. So you have a top mark line right here. You're gonna clip to there. That's what we're interested in. We don't need to worry about below that. So a little bit of my line has faded over here, so I'm just gonna redraw it. There we go. And it should match up perfectly along this top edge that we pulled together. It doesn't if you flatten it out, but we don't want it flattened out. Okay, so see, now we have this nice curve. Isn't that great? So we're gonna start at one of these marks, and we're going to back stitch, just one stitch, and go all the way around this top triangular curve till we get to the other mark. We're gonna sew at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Make sure you back stitch over there as well. Once again, you're probably gonna wanna hold your unit up. You don't wanna flatten it out at the machine and try to sew it. We don't want it flat, we want it curved. So we're gonna kind of just hold it up with my left hand and just guide it with my right hand. Look at this little wallet bowl, it's just perfect. So just like we did with the curved edge down here, now we're just gonna close up the hole here. So we have these little holes here for the bending area, but now we have them curved the way we want them. So we're gonna just close up these holes at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Once again, you know, encourage your wallet to be curved. Don't try to flatten it out. You know that by now. We don't want this flat, right? There we go. It's all sewn together and it's all nice and curvy. I love that. The pattern could have very easily just tried to make you do all of this in one step, holding it up like this, and I think that would have probably driven a lot of us crazy. By breaking it up into sections, you created this really cool professional effect, but in a simpler way, which I just love. So now let's trim down stuff so we can flip it out. First, let's start with these bottom right angles right here. Let's just trim those at a 45-degree angle. There we go. And then up here on the top, we have 1, 2, 3. 3 kind of curvy angles we need to address. What I do is with these curves, I'm gonna come at it at a 45-degree angle to the stitching. And I'm cutting close to the stitching, but not touching it. Not super close, because if this pulls, I don't wanna worry about it ripping. So I'm just gonna do like 4 cuts like that. And then I come back at it at the opposite angle, and I'm creating little triangles. So that's how I do them. I go about 4 stitches at one angle, and then I go back at the opposite angle, and that gives me these little triangles. So I'm going to do that for the other 2 curves as well. I just want to create these nice little triangles so the material can spread out as much as it needs to make this wallet look as good as possible. Here we go. We got the corners clipped everywhere, good to go. So now we need to turn the whole thing right side out, which can be a little tricky. This is not, you know, it's a difficult shape to turn out, and you want to be as gentle as possible because you can rip your material. If you rip your stitching, we can fix that. If you rip your material, I mean, it's just, that's a hard thing to fix. So let's very gently turn this out. To be honest, it takes me about 10 minutes to do this because I just tiny bit by tiny bit pull it out. In the very beginning, it almost seems like it's not even possible. All right, as you're doing this, you just cannot worry about keeping anything from being wrinkled. It's all gonna get wrinkled. We can press it. We can fix wrinkles. Rips are harder to fix, so just get it wrinkled. That's fine. All right, so you can see this is a mess. So I'm gonna grab my turning tool and I'm gonna push this up and try to push out the flap first. There we go. And then I'm gonna kind of very gently get in here and get these corners out. I've noticed that on some of mine previous wallets, whenever I get a little excited and I take my turning tool and I really poke it into these corners here, I end up ripping through the vinyl because the vinyl already has a lot of pressure on it with those stitches and it doesn't take much to rip it right here. So you gotta be really, really gentle with these corners here. Do not push hard at all. There we go. All right, looking good. Needs a good press. We need to clean up some threads. But so far, I don't see any other big problems. So that makes me happy. The vinyl worked out really well. I don't see any layers of the vinyl pulling apart. So now we want to press this a bit. So obviously we don't want to press the vinyl side. So we're going to pull in our flaps. And we're going to keep the curve, so we're not laying it super flat down. We're going to keep the curve. And if you really want, I mean, I know it's a little messy, but just fold it up and just take a look at how cute that is. Right? Look at my little happy castle. Oh, it's adorable. Oh, if this doesn't get you excited, I don't know what does. Okay, so I know this is a mess here. I'm not worried about that right now. So once again, I'm not touching my vinyl with the iron. I'm just pressing from the lining side. And by doing this from the lining side, I will also be pressing, get some steam on this. I'll also be getting the interfacing that's on the exterior side, which will help make the exterior look better as well. Get everything lined up. Oh, that looks good now, doesn't it? See? Don't worry about getting it wrinkly. So once you have it pressed, now we need to address this mess over here. So what I do is I kind of open it up and you see I still have my Decoville light in there. So I'm just gonna wrap my vinyl around that Decoville light and then add some clips. I'm just wrapping it around and adding clips. Okay, so now looking at the lining side, I have the same situation, right? I have that SoFuse Plus there, so I can just wrap my lining around the interfacing and then I line it up with the folded edge of my vinyl to get them in the same spot and add some clips. If you've got some fraying, threads, whatever hanging out, don't worry about that right now. We will clean it up. Right now we're just worried about the material folding in on itself, getting all those raw edges in there and lining up with one another. There we go. See, I don't know if you can see, but right here I've got some threads just hanging out. I will trim those, burn those later. I'm not concerned about them right now. Okay. The difficult thing is that this is a noticeable seam, and so you want it to look as clean as possible. So, there we go. Oh, this looks good. So now we're going to top stitch around the entire exterior at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. That's also going to close this hole down here. If it's helpful and you have a bed on your sewing machine that you can take off so you just have the arm, you might want to do that so you can kind of just keep the wrap. You know, you don't want to have to force this to flatten out too much. But even if you can't do that and you do kind of have to force it to flatten, you're gonna be fine. I've done that on the other two and it was fine. Look at how cute this is. I just can't get over this wallet. It's adorable. So you might have noticed I did backstitch at the beginning and the end, just one stitch, because I need it to stay durable, but I am still going to pull the threads through to the lining side and tie them off for just keep it durable, but also keep it clean. And where I have some of these, you know, kind of just ugly ends, that's all. I'm just gonna very gently like that. So I'm not burning my fabric. I'm not leaving any like marks anywhere. I'm just trying to clean it up. So over here I have the same thing. I have some threads peeking out. I'm gonna trim them, and then I'm gonna burn them. You know, you work so hard on these cute projects. You don't want the little things, like little threads and things like that, to be what people notice. So I just having a lighter on hand to clean them up, I think it's a great tool. Alrighty, we're almost done. So now open up those flaps just like this and fold the unit in half like that. So we're matching up the flaps. It's like got like a little Batman here. So take one flap combo and just line them up perfectly. Grab some clips and clip them together. We're worried about this side right here, this folded edge right here. We need those to be lined up as perfectly as you can get them. You can do the other side as well. So now we're gonna sew along these two straight edges at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end. So just like I've been doing, I backstitch at the tops and the bottoms. I cut the thread as short as I can get it, and then just to keep it clean, I burn the ends. There we go. It just gives a nice clean finish. How cute is this wallet? Oh my gosh. So you can put this to the side while we build the zipper pocket. So you're going to grab all 4 units for your zipper pocket, and you're going to need your zipper. So when I do my zipper, I just take some zipper tape. Again, this is great if you have scraps of zipper tape. And then I just cut it so it's a little bit longer than it needs to be, like that. And I'll put my zipper pull on here. And if you're using a pre-made zipper, that works great. If you're using a number 3 zipper, that is perfect. If you're using a number 5 zipper, also perfect. 4.5 zipper. Any zipper is gonna work here. Just use what you have. It doesn't have to be anything special. So now what we wanna do is flip everything over and make sure if you have a directional print, you know which side is the top. And we're gonna mark the midpoint along the top edge of all of our panels and also the midpoint on both edges of the zipper. So for the fabric panels, all you have to do is fold it in half, pinch, and mark the midpoint. And then same thing for the zipper. I like just move the zipper to the side a little bit and then fold the zipper tape in half and pinch and mark. Okay, so now grab one of your zipper pocket panels without the interfacing on it and lay it right side up. And then grab your zipper and lay it right side up. And you can have the zipper going to the left when closed if you prefer. And match up those midpoint marks. Grab some clips to hold it together. So I always clip at the middle and then I clip out towards the edges. Now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're going to sew along this clipped edge at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Go ahead and put your zipper foot on now if you need to. Once that's sewn on, grab one of your zipper panels that does have the interfacing and we're going to lay that right side down on top of the right side of the zipper. Once again, matching up those midpoints. And the point of those midpoint marks is just to make it easier to match up all the edges. You don't want to sew these together and everything's, you know, lined up all wonky. Now we're going to sew along this edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. You're going to want to move your zipper as you're sewing. So I move my zipper down a little bit. Sew at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Once I get close to it, I stop sewing, I lift up my presser foot, and then I move my zipper past, and then I put the presser foot back down and continue sewing. But I always leave my needle down. So once you have those sewn together, you can flip them wrong sides together. Now the pattern has you top stitch this at a later step, probably just so it's easier to top stitch everything at once. But I need this out of my way while I'm sewing, so you can grab an iron here and press this seam right along the zipper tape with an iron to get it nice and flat. I like to clip along the bottom edge first to get them to meet up. So get those bottom edges to match up, and then all you have to do is just finger press right along this edge here by the zipper. And my zipper coils are plastic that look like metal, but they are not metal. And I can press on top of them, just not for too long, but I can press them. Okay, so now I'm gonna go to the sewing machine and I'm gonna top stitch right along this edge at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. It's really just holding down the lining and the exterior so it's not in my way. So once you have one side done, we're just going to repeat that for the other side. So grab the other lining without the interfacing and lay it right side up. Take your zipper and lay it right side up. Match up those midpoint marks, and when you do that, it should match up with the sides of the fabric you already sewed on. So if it's way off, we're more concerned about making sure these edges are all lined up rather than the midpoint marks. But they should all go together. So now let's sew along this clipped edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once you have that sewn on, take your last lining piece, and it's the one with the interfacing on it, and lay it right side down. Again, if you have a directional print, the top edge is going to go along the zipper. And line up those midpoint marks, or just line up along the edges. It should be exactly where the other one is. There we go. So it's right side of material to right side of zipper tape. And now let's sew along this edge at 1/4 inch seam allowance. And just to make it easier top stitching, we are going to press this again. So be careful with this zipper. You don't want to lose it. I mean, you can put it back on if you do lose it. It's not the end of the world, but it's just a nuisance. So line up those bottom edges and then give it a good press with your fingers, and then press it with the iron to really get it nice and flat, and so you don't have to worry about holding it together while you stitch it. All right, and now let's just go top stitch along this edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now, take the two pieces that have the interfacing and pull them right sides together, and take the two pieces without the interfacing and pull them right sides together. And we're just gonna line them up on their bottom edges. So it does everything, don't worry about the zipper. We're not doing anything with the zipper right now. We're just doing these bottom raw edges. So line up the exterior pieces and then your loosey-goosey lining pieces. Now, on the side with the interfacing, I'm going to sew this along the bottom edge at 1/4 inch seam allowance. But on the side with the lining, we're going to go at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance because this can get pretty baggy. So the sides with the interfacing, 1/4 inch, sides without interfacing, 3/8 of an inch, just along these bottom edges. So once you have that all sewn, you're going to probably have to undo the open part of your zipper. The closed part of your zipper, leave it. And do your best to not lose your zipper off the end when you do this. But we're going to flip the whole thing out just like this. And I kind of hold on to my zipper while I'm doing this to make sure it doesn't fly off the end. There we go. And you want to make sure on the outside is the part with the interfacing. So if you have the lining on the outside, just flip it around. So the outside should be the part with the interfacing, and then the inside are the panels that don't have any interfacing. So let's just flatten this out with our fingers, and then you can grab an iron and you can flatten it out with the iron as well. I'm usually pretty lazy when it comes to ironing things while I'm sewing, but for a wallet and with this type of interfacing, you want to do it. You want to take that extra time to just really clean everything up before you move on to the next step. So if your zipper is longer than the edges of the panel, now's the time to trim it down. So I just pinch it and cut it. Again, remember my zipper teeth are plastic, so I can easily cut them with scissors. And I can also sew over them. So now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to sew down these side raw edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, your little adorable zip pocket's ready to go in your wallet. So grab that little bat wallet. And now think about this now, which way you want your zipper to go when closed. I install mine backwards often. So I want my zipper to go to the left when closed, when in the wallet like this. So I'm gonna line it up like this. Zipper pull goes in the center right now. We're gonna start on the left side. So I'm gonna insert it in here and I'm gonna tuck it in to those flaps right here where I sewed at 1/8 of an inch. I'm gonna tuck it into there. And I don't have my pocket going all the way to the bottom. It's not poking out down here. And it's not going over the top either. There should be just enough room to cover both the top zipper teeth and also the bottoms down here. If you've got some fray little threads, we're gonna clean those up in just a minute, so don't even worry about them. So we want this to tuck in to that seam all the way. I mean, really push it in. You don't want it to be too loose. Get it in there, grab some clips and clip it together. And now, when we sew this, my machine does not like going over 2 layers of zipper teeth when they're stacked on their sides. So when they're stacked like this, you know, it doesn't like it. My needles break. So this is the open side of my zipper. I kind of push one of the teeth down a little bit so that they're kind of stacked. So instead of like this, like here's one side of the zipper tape, here's the other, these are the teeth. Instead of being like this, I have them like this. And on the other side, the same thing. I'll twist the whole thing a little bit so that they're more flat rather than stacked. And that just prevents needle breaks. So if that's a problem you encounter, it's something to think about. All right, so we're gonna sew along this first edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end and go all the way from top to bottom. So once you have one side sewn down, let's just clean this up while we're here, because once we work on the other side, you're not even going to see any of this, which again, you don't really need to clean this up so much because you won't see it. All right, there we go. Now, this part's a little bit trickier. You're gonna pull the other edge in. So don't worry about anything being straight. We're gonna yank it all the way over like this, because now we need to tuck it into the other side and it doesn't quite reach. So you're gonna have to really push, kind of mush up your wallet a little bit. That's okay. So just like we did on the other side, we wanna make sure it doesn't go off the edge like this. See how it's peeking out over there? We don't want that. We need it to go up inside that seam, and it should cover the top and the bottom. And you can kind of push down on these dividers as well. This part's a little bit trickier because everything wants to pull the opposite direction of where you want it to go. So get one area in there and add some clips to really make it stay, and then work on the other side. And again, up here, you see how it's kind of flat right now? I'm gonna rotate it. I'm gonna rotate it down a little bit because my machine is not gonna be okay with me sewing over that. So I rotate it down just a little bit. It's not a big deal, you never notice it. All right, so now I have it like this. We're gonna sew along this edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning and the end. That was the last stitching, so once again, let's just, maybe I just like playing with fire too much. I don't think so. I'm not, no, that's fine. Okay, so now we're just gonna push this in, center that zipper panel. You can close your zipper, kind of close it up. Look at how stinking cute that is. Look at that. Can you believe that? I love it. And you know what? My label is just a little crooked, isn't it? Every single time. It doesn't matter how much I try. It's always a little crooked. It's my signature. All right, last thing we have to do is add the snap. So let's talk about the snap. First of all, tools. Over here on the right, this is what I'm gonna be using. This is my rivet press. Here are all the dies, and I'm using these metal fashion snaps. That's what they're called. This is all from Cam Snaps. If you're not ready to invest in something this industrial, this is a great option. This is also from Cam Snaps. This is a hand press, so you just press it down with hand. It takes up a lot less space. You can put it in a drawer. You don't have to worry about, you know, how big it is. It's not as intimidating as maybe something like this. And then just get this set right here. It's not always available, but this is a fantastic set of snaps. They have different shapes. There's like butterflies and flowers and everything like that. You don't need any sort of special die. All of them will set in this handheld tool here. And it works really well. I know there's some really inexpensive options for this tool right here online, and they're cheap for a reason. They don't work well. I cannot recommend this setup enough if you're just starting out. If you've been making bags for a while, then you know it's probably time you invest in one of these. Okay, so let's first start with placement of the snap on the flap. So you're gonna wanna get your exterior flat panel interfacing piece. This is going to be the most helpful. And you can see there's a little dot right here, and I poked a hole in it with my seam ripper, stiletto, with a stiletto. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna line that up right along the edge, because this flap essentially is the exact same size as this pattern piece, right? Because that's what we used to shape the whole thing. So just make sure it's lined up perfectly. Grab any sort of marking tool and just mark where that dot is. Okay, so I can see my little dot. I already lost it. Where'd it go? Okay, I can see my little dot. Before I lose it again, I'm gonna punch a hole right there. So I actually have a whole separate, you don't need another press to punch a hole, but I have it, so why not? So I'm just gonna punch a hole right where that dot is. And there we go, and I'll poke it out with my stiletto. Now I'm going to install the female end of my snap, because the female end, the backing of it is this like little rivet looking cap, and that's what we want to have shown because it's pretty, right? So we're going to get the dies that go with that. So the bottom die for that looks like this. It's like a little kind of a flat bowl, kind of like a plate. That goes in the bottom. And then the top die is going to be this one right here that has like a bit of a nub on it, because that's going to go right into the female snap part. So we're going to just lay this like this and then put our female end on here. Now, if you've seen me work with rivets before, you know you can snap rivets in place and then just go on and keep working on things. These are not rivets. You have to hold them in place, get them set up. Let me install top die still. All right, so once it's all set up, push down, and you can kind of hear it snap in place. And when you pull it up, it should be stuck to the top die because that's essentially acting as like the male part of the snap. So you should have to unsnap it from the top die. And there you go. Isn't that cute? And it's simple. I love this. Okay, so now we got to install the bottom part. So you can grab your pattern piece and line it up here and install it, or you can do what I do. You just kind of figure it out based on how you're going to use it. So I don't want it to be super tight because then when I fill it up with things, it's going to kind of get messed up. So I kind of fold it over and then I raise it up just a scotch like that. I'm not exact about this. Okay. So I have it raised up just a bit. And honestly, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lift this up and take a peek underneath. So I just kind of pull it up a little bit, figure out where the thing is, and then I mark a dot. I'm not that precise. The one thing I will do though now is, now that it's like this, I will grab a ruler and just kind of make sure that it's centered for the most part. Yeah, that looks good. So now we need to punch this hole, and this part's a little bit trickier. You might want to grab a handheld hole punch if you have one. Let me see if I can get it in here. I've done it before in here, but you don't want to punch through your card slot pockets. You want to punch through the exterior and the lining, but not the card slots. So we're gonna, you know what, I am gonna get the handheld. And you definitely could install this before you construct everything together, but you don't really know exactly where everything's gonna end up. Things don't always go according to plan. So I'm just gonna kind of push this through and use my handheld punch to get a hole in there. There we go. All right, it doesn't have to be pretty, just has to be a hole. So what we're gonna do, let's first change out our dies. So now we have two dies that look like this. The bottom die is like a pointer. It's like a thorn. It's pretty sharp. And then the top die has a little hole on the top of it, and this is how we're going to set the male end of the snap. Okay, and so for the male end of the snap, we have two pieces with nubs. The two nubby pieces. One has a long nub, one has a short nub. The long nub one is going to go into the lining and poke through the hole, just like that. The short nub one goes on top of the long nub one. There's gotta be actual words for these things. All right, and then we gotta finagle this in here. So again, you wanna make sure you're not messing up any other material, but we're gonna just lay it so that the vinyl is right side up, and then everything is lined up, and then push down. Now we'll set it. There we go. And I know it gets a little crinkly. If you're using quilt cotton material, you can press it again if you'd like. But look at that. Look how cute that is. Can you? This is adorable. I cannot get over how cute this is. You know you want to make one of these. Oh my goodness. It's just so cute. Even with my little cockeyed bag tag and everything. Look at how adorable this turned out. I love it. Let's open her up. Look at that. Oh my goodness, it's so cute. Oh my gosh. So I've made 3 so far. I could definitely make a lot more than this. I could make a whole bunch. I love this one too. So this would be also a great men's wallet. So I know a lot of you guys are always asking for things to make for the men in your life. Depending on the material you use, this is a great men's wallet as well. It's not like a back pocket wallet. I mean, this would be pretty bulky in a back pocket, but if you had someone in your life who uses like a laptop bag a lot, or a messenger bag or a backpack, this would be a great wallet for that. Like I said, this is like the ultimate travel wallet. It's perfect for when you just need a few things. You just need your credit cards, your ID, just the basic things. Oh my gosh, they're so cute. So I hope you guys are excited to make these. If you do make it, please make sure you either email me a picture or you tag me on social media. I gotta see your version. You guys know how much I love making everything, and so many times I'm like, oh, I would make 100 of these. And if I had time to do that, I would. But you know me, I have to move on to the next project. But this is one of those patterns that I will come back to. Like if there were, oh man, Miss Freckles Design, if you have anybody you can hook up with to have acrylic templates made for this, I would be all over that, because this is one of those patterns I would 100% buy the acrylic templates for so that I could just pull them out. I don't have to find my pieces of paper. I don't have to worry about printing it off again. And I can just bust out dozens of them. I mean, if you are a bag maker and seller and you have holiday markets coming up, I feel like these would sell very well at a holiday craft market, right? They're useful, they're cute, and they don't require a whole bunch of stuff, and they don't require a whole bunch of time. So, for my business folks out there, let me know. Let me know if you would make these and sell them. I think that they would do well. So thank you so much for sewing with me today. Thank you, as always, to Miss Freckles Designs for allowing me to use your patterns in my tutorials. They absolutely love them. I go down a rabbit hole and I buy all of her latest patterns, and then I have this big folder full of patterns, and it's like, well, I can't just do 2 months of Miss Freckles. So we have a lot more coming up. If you see one of her patterns you'd like to see, leave a comment down below. Yes, there is a larger size of this. Guys, there's a larger, it's like longer. I know, just like the zip one, there's a larger one. It's on the list. They're all on the list. I hope you're having a great day. Have a fantastic rest of your week. Get out there and make something. Bye, guys.